Close your eyes and imagine standing in absolute darkness. Stone walls press in around you. The air is thick with moisture and the metallic scent of old blood. Somewhere in the shadows you hear the slow creak of a wheel turning, the rattle of chains, the whisper of iron against stone. You are beneath a cathedral. Above you, hymns are being sung, prayers are being offered, but down here in this forgotten room, faith wore a different face. For 500 years, the Church authorized suffering on an industrial scale. They built devices, they trained specialists, they kept meticulous records. And then, when it was over, they sealed the rooms and pretended none of it ever happened. But the evidence remains, hidden in locked archives, buried beneath sacred ground, waiting in museum storage rooms that most will never see. Today we're going into those spaces, we're opening those files, and we're asking the question institutions hoped we'd never ask. What happens when those who claim moral authority become architects of calculated cruelty? This is the history they tried to erase. Beneath a cathedral in Bamberg, Germany, renovators in 1962 broke through a sealed wall. Inside was a chamber forgotten for 300 years. They found tools, iron maidens, strappado pulleys, spiked chairs, and records documenting who screamed for how long and what they confessed. Church officials asked for quiet handling. Documents were removed. The room was resealed. This is about institutions that wielded suffering as policy, then erased the evidence. Divine justice medieval law held that truth could only be extracted, never freely given. Only pain could reveal the soul's actual state. This wasn't cruelty, it was mercy. Pope Innocent IV authorized torture in 1252. What followed was an arms race of suffering. The strappado hoisted victims by their wrists bound behind their backs, shoulders dislocated, tendons tore, weights increased the damage, the rack stretched bodies slowly, joints separated, spines elongated, victims remained conscious. The Judas Cradle impaled victims over hours. The pair of anguish expanded inside body cavities, tearing tissue. The breast ripper marked women permanently. These devices were displayed before interrogation. Many confessed at the sight alone. For those who didn't, notaries recorded every detail. The paperwork was meticulous. Every town knew where the chambers were. Neighbors informed on neighbors. Children reported parents. The torture chamber bent all behavior toward compliance. In Inquisition territories, populations lived in sustained terror. The devices were rarely needed. Their existence was enough. When torture ended in the 18th century, no one apologized. Documents vanished into restricted archives, chambers were sealed, historians encountered institutional resistance, access was denied, records disappeared. Official histories mention torture only in passing, framing devices as aberrations rather than policy. This was gaslighting at civilizational scale. In the German museum, torture devices sit in glass cases. The precision of their metalwork speaks to professional use, institutional sanction, normalized law. For 500 years, they worked as intended. The torturers believed they did God's work. Evil at scale rarely thinks itself evil. It thinks itself necessary. The devices are scattered now. The chambers filled in, the screams silent, but the structure that enabled them, institutional power, fused with moral certainty and willingness to inflict suffering, isn't medieval, it isn't past, it's a blueprint. The Church pretended these never existed, but they did. Once you acknowledge machinery of sanctioned suffering, you face an uncomfortable question. What are we capable of when authority gives permission? The devices are silent. The question echoes. The last victim of judicial torture in Europe died in 1788. That's not medieval history. That's 6 years before the French Revolution. George Washington was already president. The age of sanctioned suffering didn't end because institutions suddenly grew consciences. It ended because the Enlightenment made torture philosophically indefensible, but no one apologized. No one admitted wrongdoing. They simply stopped talking about it. And for 2 centuries, that silence held. But here's what keeps me awake. The structure that enabled all of this, the combination of institutional power, absolute certainty, and the willingness to cause suffering for what you believe is a greater good, that structure isn't unique to the medieval church. It's not locked safely in the past, it's a pattern. And throughout history, that pattern repeats. Different institutions, different ideologies, different enemies, but the same blueprint. We are righteous, they are dangerous, extreme measures are justified, the torture devices are gone, the Inquisition is over, but the question remains alive. What are we capable of when authority tells us our cruelty serves a higher purpose? The church tried to bury this history. They sealed the chambers, they hid the documents, they rewrote the narrative. But Stone remembers what institutions forget. If this investigation into history's darkest corners affected you, leave a comment below. Subscribe for more stories they hoped would stay buried. And ask yourself, what uncomfortable truths is our own time trying to seal away? The torture chambers are empty now, but the mechanisms of power that filled them are not. Thanks for watching. And remember, the past isn't dead. It's not even past.